I'm not so sure anyone expected much more from the Spanish Grand Prix. The Spanish Grand Prix is a difficult one because it's not really the most yielding track. Follow me with this. It's great for testing. It's got lots of straights and corners and undulations and tight corners, long corners, slow corners, fast corners. It's great for testing cars. It's a very good circuit for that because it kind of puts the car through their paces. You can test out a lot of different things at this circuit. But when it comes to racing, it's never been the best for racing, overtaking, fights on track. I think the statistic is 80% of the winners have come from the front row or something ridiculous, and possibly even higher than that. I can't remember off the top of my head. So it's not really the best racetrack for racing, which is strong coming from me, considering I absolutely love Permi circuits. I prefer Permi circuits to street circuits, but you do still get some stinkers of Permi circuits. And let me get this straight, I'm not saying that the Circuit de Barcelona-Catalunya is bad, not at all. It's just not the best at yielding good results. It's almost a little bit like it's won on Saturday kind of thing. There's the option, obviously, things go wrong, undertaking from the pits, getting the best start off the line, all these factors can come into it, which is a little bit more than could be said for a circuit like Baku or Monaco. But it's still not the most yielding of all circuits. So I'm not overtly surprised this wasn't the most interesting race in the world. Portugal also put us on that mindset that this wasn't going to be amazing. But yeah, you always go into these race weekends with a little bit of hope that something could be a little bit different and be a little bit more interesting to elevate the race. I had to rewatch the highlights for this race because, quite frankly, I mean, I'm a bit late to recording it anyway because it's a week gone now, but quite frankly, I couldn't really remember much of the race itself. Because it wasn't very interesting. It wasn't one that had me captivated and wanting to watch for the entire 2 hours or so. Whereas other races at the start of the season have managed to successfully do that. So hopefully moving forwards, the races can get a little bit more interesting, a little bit more captivating. Because it'll just become another boring season if it doesn't. Mercedes seem to have got a grip on whatever, if ever, there was something wrong with their car. It's seeming very, very strong, competitive. It's successful over many different types of circuits now. The Red Bull's starting to show a couple of chinks in the armor now, which is starting to hand the advantage to Mercedes. Obviously, one of the big ones from the weekend was the pit stops. I think it was a late call pit stop from Verstappen, which was a real shame because he had an amazing start. He put the car exactly where it needed to be to get ahead of Hamilton off the line. Cracking start from Verstappen, but unfortunately that pit stop, did they do two? I don't think they did. I think they did two, but too late. We'll get to that. The first pit stop was a late call, supposedly. They brought out the tyres a bit late, which did slow down that stop, kind of hand the advantage back to Mercedes at that point, but Verstappen did still manage to retain the lead. Bigger talking point this weekend again was the tyres and the fade off of the tyres. It seems like for Portugal and for Spain, once the tyres are gone, that is it. If you're on dead tyres, there's no coming back from it. The fresher tyres last too long to have the balance swing back in your advantage, if you will. So it's interesting that a couple of teams tried to make a one-stop work. We saw obviously with Verstappen, there was just nothing they could do to keep Hamilton behind. He was on the fresher tyres. He carved into that gap super fast. I think, again, Red Bull were just hoping that Hamilton's tyres would fade before the end of the race so that he wouldn't have a chance to overtake Verstappen, but I think he actually made the pass for the lead with 10 laps to go. For the top three to finish kind of with the same top three as started. I mean, did they start and finish in exactly the same way? Top four was identical at the end of the race from the start. That's not normally the sign of a good race. Same position, same cars, top four locked out from qualifying to the race. So, you know, again, not the most interesting race. Nothing really happened apart from a bit of drama with the tyres that fell the advantage into Hamilton's hands for otherwise what would have been a very good drive from Verstappen and Red Bull. Great drive from Leclerc. to keep that, to firstly qualify that Ferrari 4th and keep that Ferrari 4th. He had an amazing start, put some good pressure on Bottas at the start and actually took 3rd. And for a while, it looked like Bottas wasn't coming back at all. So a very good start from Leclerc. He obviously has a very good handle with that car. He knows that car. And the talk from him and Ferrari seemed to be that the car is moving in the right direction. As for race wins, I still think we're a while away from that from Ferrari, because Red Bull and Mercedes, if Ferrari is here, Red Bull and Mercedes are over here, right? So far, even that my hand's gonna have frame. They're so much further ahead from the rest of the field. It's not, in the space of a season where you don't really have any testing, especially this season because everything's being cost cut because of COVID last year and the ramifications of that, you don't have enough on-track testing to really put the miles on the car to really start progressing that car. And that's one of the issues we've seen since the V6 turbo era came in, is that because of the lack of testing, these gaps are made at the start of the season, and maybe they'll come a little bit closer by the end of it, but there's just no time. There's not enough time for the cars to try out new things and find out where those advantages are and optimize parts of the car, because it's all done CDF and it's all done in the wind tunnels and it's all done in the simulators. If you have one tiny problem in the sim or the wind tunnel or the configurations like that, and you then put that on the car, you're backwards, not forwards. It's so difficult to properly translate these things. There's just not enough time. And I get it, because it is cost cutting and it's trying to keep the big guns, Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull, from running down the track and keep the fight content. But I say that, and then you look at the grid this year, you have a solid 1-2 fight, a solid 3-4 fight, a midfield fight, and a back of the pack. And none of those groups are really close enough to the other groups to interfere with them, if you get me. So yes, the idea of cost caps and all this is to help keep the smaller teams in the fight with the bigger teams, but they're not in the fight with the bigger teams at all. And when you do this kind of thing, you then just get dominance that can't be broken, as we've seen for the last 8 years. Nothing has changed since these new engines have come in. So it's a little bit of a rock and a hard place, because yes, you want to keep the cost low so the small teams, can fight with the big teams, but they're not there. They're not fighting with the big teams. And so all you're really doing is restricting the big teams from fighting with each other, because the grid is set pretty much from the start of the season. So a little bit of an odd one there. But yeah, hopefully Ferrari can make some progress, maybe bring 3 teams into the fight at the front. I severely doubt it. I still think it will be McLaren versus Ferrari for 3rd and 4th in the championship, which is super tight at the moment, if I recall correctly. And then Mercedes and Red Bull fighting at the front for 1st and 2nd, but already it feels like Mercedes are starting to pull a good lead and kind of disappear into the distance, with Red Bull kind of picking up the pieces, doing very well, having very strong weekends, but just not enough to kind of chip away at the dominance. Mercedes needs to be under pressure for Mercedes to crack, right? They're very good at leading races. They're very good at commanding races. They're very good at controlling from the front, because they've had 7 years of practice of it. They know how to do it very efficiently. They know how their car handles in clean air. They know how to get around traffic with the blue flags. Maybe we'll talk about those. But when you start putting Mercedes under pressure, when you've got Red Bull actually there fighting for those positions, when you've got the Mercedes not starting at the front, they're starting slightly further down, they're having to fight up the field to get the positions, that's when you start to see the mistakes. That's when the pressure's turned on. That's when you start to reveal those moments of weakness, if you will, from Mercedes. And I think with the way things are going, if Red Bull can't consistently keep that pressure, Mercedes will not keep faltering. Like, well, which one was it? Imola was an amazing example of pressure. You had a Mercedes that was way out of the way, down in 9th, and Hamilton also made mistakes because of the pressure of trying to catch up and keep up with the Red Bulls. That's what you need to push a team like Mercedes into a mistake, because they're not used to that kind of pressure. It's a new scenario. It's a new thing to have to deal with. If you get me, am I making sense? Good drive for Perez to make it to 5th on the grid as well at the end there. Qualifying, I think, needs to kind of step it up a little bit. It's difficult because he's driving a car that's not designed for him. I think everyone knows that. I don't think that's a secret or a surprise to anyone, that the Red Bull is designed and built predominantly for Verstappen. And Perez is doing a very good job in that car, don't get me wrong, but he does need to kind of I think if he qualifies better, he can be better at putting the pressure up the front. He'd definitely be rocking in some more fourths, maybe stealing a couple of podiums if Bottas is having a bad weekend. So he needs to start starting a little bit higher up the grid to really start optimizing the package he has, I think. But from 8th to 5th, a good drive from him and some nice points, some solid points for Red Bull to kind of keep them in the fight with Mercedes, although that gap is growing already in constructors. Bit of a crisscross weekend for McLaren on the other hand, because they tried to do what Red Bull did, or tried to do with Verstappen with Norris, and at the end of the race he was just on completely dead tyres, had no pace really, and did start to fall down the order, luckily only down to 8th behind Carlos Sainz in the second Ferrari. We kind of had a good race, really did pull off the better strategy there from McLaren, and took advantage of those fresher tyres. I think at the end of it, the 2-stop was the way to go, because the time you lost in that second stop, you easily carved out of anyone who hadn't made that second stop, because their tyres were so lacking of grip and just completely dead and off the cliff, basically. So the 2-stop was definitely the strategy to go for, and I think Norris was the highest runner on the 1-stop strategy, because remember, Verstappen did try and make the 1-stop, but once Hamilton had passed him, he did pit for fresh tyres to go for that fastest lap. A weekend of mixed for McLaren, not bad points, finishing ahead of 1 Ferrari, which is good for them in constructors. I think that just keeps, I think it's 60 to 65, so 60 for Ferrari, 65 for McLaren, the split there. For the constructors, so it kept them ahead of Ferrari, gave them a couple more points over Sainz and stuff, so not a bad weekend for McLaren, but a fairly average. Like I said, this is kind of where I expect these cars to be. 1, 2, 3, 4 is a variation of 2 Mercedes and 2 Red Bulls. 5, 6, 7, 8 is a variation of 2 Ferraris and 2 McLarens. The last 2 points get fought out by Alpine, AlphaTauri and Aston Martin. That's kind of what we've been seeing already this season. Pretty much what I expect us to continue seeing this season. Just to prove my point correct, the last 2 places were rounded out by Esteban Ocon in the Alpine and Pierre Gasly in the AlphaTauri. Ocon had a good weekend. He's really kind of seeming to have a better handle on that car than Alonso. He's showing him up a little bit, which is kind of fun. Who'd have thought you'd be showing up a 2-time world champion who's on definitely bigger pay than you. So yeah, a really good weekend from Ocon. In the last 2 weekends, he's been showing his stuff a lot more. He's been looking stronger, he's been looking faster, he's been looking like he can bring a fight to Alonso. And I think that's only a good thing for Alpine. Again, that car's just not there in terms of pace or performance in fighting really any higher than 8th, 9th. Any higher than that is on a fluke or luck that one of the bigger teams has gone down or one of the bigger cars has gone out. It is what it is. It's the order we've got. And it's just, it feels like already, and we're only 4 races in of 22, maybe 23. We'll get to that in a minute. It just feels like already the order's set. The constructors is kind of there. We kind of know where everyone's going to end. Yes, it's nice to have some battles on track through the race because that's what you want. You don't just want to fight up the front. You want to fight all the way through the grid. But we've already got these kind of divisions, and I mean, you'd like to see everyone crisscross all the way up the grid. Last year was cracking because aside from right at the front, most of the midfield, like probably from P4 down to P12, could have been any order. It was all over the place. And okay, that's slightly attributed to the fact that Ferrari was pretty bad last year, and they have made some good progress, which has kind of put them back at the top of that pecking order. And also the change for McLaren, moving from the Renault to the Mercedes engine, now they have a much better power unit. They are also bang up the top of that pecking order. But it was so nice to see lots of different cars fighting, and you didn't actually know who was going to win a race. Well, you did, but sorry. You didn't actually know who was going to finish ahead of who in that midfield battle because it was so tight. Like I said, it wasn't the most exciting. You had the incident with Raikkonen at the start where he was apparently changing something with his dash and went straight back into the back of his teammate, which rule number 1 of racing is don't hit your teammate, so not the best. Still managed to come and finish the race, finish 12th. And then also the blue flag debacle. Wow, someone's not making a good name for themselves, are they? I'm shocked that the Haas driver doesn't have more penalty points than he currently does. He seems to be on a mission to absolutely miff everybody on the grid off. So we'll see how that goes down for him as the season progresses. But he doesn't seem to be having a nice time about it. And I think kind of proof is in the pudding, in the sense that yes, the Haas is definitely the worst car on the grid. I think we all are aware of that. But if you compare him to his teammate Schumacher, you can see in performance over the races and during the races and over the weekends, Schumacher's blowing him out of the water. The last 2 races, I think he's finished at least a minute behind Schumacher in the exact same car. So, yeah, I'll just leave that there. I don't think I need to say any more on that topic. Unfortunately, as we celebrated Turkey's return last time, it has gone, it has fallen off. The COVID situation in Turkey is too high, too severe, and they can't risk taking Formula One there. So that has fallen off. It has been replaced by a second Austrian race. I don't really know why. We've got 22 races without Turkey. We don't need 23. I don't really get the obsession with needing all of these races, especially if they're boring, like the one we just had. I would much prefer them to have 18 races that were on cracking circuits and were exciting to watch and were a real thrill, rather than having 23 and they be as dull as watching paint dry. So yes, unfortunately Turkey's gone. Turkey, that came to replace Canada, has gone and has now been replaced by Austria too. I don't like it when they race twice on the same circuit. I don't think it's necessary. And like I said, I don't think it's necessary to have 23 races. Like, calm down. It's not important enough. Just be grateful we got races, all right? If they fall off, they fall off. We have to roll with the punches at the moment. Things are getting back to normal, but we're still not there yet. But that's kind of all that happened over the last week in the world of Formula One. Please let me know your thoughts about the Spanish Grand Prix. Let me know if you think we should continue to go to the Circuit de Barcelona-Catalunya in the future for races. It's a great test track, as I mentioned at the start of the video, and I do feel it's the best place to go testing with Formula One cars. But do you think the race should continue going there? I know there was talk about contracts. Last year, Spain increased the contract by 1 year, which then obviously got poo-pooed, I think. Oh no, did we go? We went last year. They extended it by 1 year to capture in last year, and then they did that again. I don't think it's got more than a 1 year retention on it though. I think they're 1 year rolling it. So let me know if you think it's a good circuit to go racing, if you think yes, the racing should be there, but it's because of the pack order or the dominance of the grid that we get these poor races there, or if maybe there's somewhere else in Spain we should go, or indeed if we should go to Spain at all. Do let me know down in the comment section below. Let me know your thoughts, let me know your feelings, let me know everything, and we will continue the discussion downstairs. But for now, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. It's been an absolute blast, as always. If you enjoyed this video, go show that like button some good old-fashioned love. And if you want to support the channel, go hit subscribe and ring that bell so you don't miss next time I upload a video. Stay awesome, and I will see you all in the next video! Trying to be a bit careful about what I'm wearing, but hopefully this sounded good. And if it didn't, you won't know because I won't use the audio.